Hey scholars, it's Miss Marnon. So we were practicing a lot with some fractions today, or the past 2 days. So now we're going to start reviewing percents. So we're going to do some stuff that you should have already learned in 6th grade when you did percents, but we're just going to review it to kind of ease our way into it. So our objective today is I can write p% as a fraction p over 100. I can convert between fractions, percents, and decimals. So we're going to learn how to do that without a calculator and then also with a calculator, because we need to have the conceptual understanding of how percents are related to fractions and decimals. But then once you guys kind of get that, we can actually use our calculators to do it for us. So our first question on our DIN is a review question. So what we were doing the last few days. JJ is making chocolate chip cookies. He eats 6 of them, which is 3/8 of the total batch. So he eats 6 of them, which is 3/8 of the total batch. How many cookies did JJ make? So we need to find the whole or the total on this one. So pause the video and try this review question on your own. Okay, so for the easiest way for us so far to find the total or the whole is to draw a tape diagram. So I'm going to draw my tape diagram. I don't know the total, so I can't fill that in, but I do know that 3/8 is 6 of them. So let's split this into 8ths by cutting it into half once, twice, then 3 times. So now I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8ths. We know that 3 of them, 3/8 is what he ate, and that is 6. So if I have 6 for 3, 6 divided by 3, we can put 2 cookies in each box and then extend that for our whole diagram. So you can add this up, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 and so on, or we can recognize that repeated addition is multiplication and do 2 times the 8 boxes, and you'll get 16 total cookies. So JJ made 16 cookies. For our preview question, you're going to just match each fraction to the corresponding percent. So see how much you know. So 1/2 is what percent? So drawing the lines, matching them. So pause the video and see if you can match each of these fractions to their percents. Okay, so you should have gotten 1/2 is 50%. 1/10 is 10%. 1/4 is 25%, and 1/5 is 20%. So those are our matching ones that we're going to do. So those are some of the big numbers we'll see a lot: 1/2, 1/4, 1/5, 1/10, making sure that we recognize what those are as percents. So let's get into our notes. So for percent, per cent means per. If you speak another language, cent means 100. So it means per 100, so for every 100. So 1% is the number 1 out of 100, right? We know that fraction is per, 1 per 100. And is written, we write 1% as 1%, like that. So the number, if I have any p%, right? So if I say any number, so 4%, 3%, whatever, it's p out of 100. P per 100, percent per 100. So our example, we could have 3% is 3 out of 100. We can have 27%, 27 out of 100. See if you can come up with one of your own examples, but that's all we mean. When we're talking about percent, we mean for 100. So let's look at our first exercise. So exercise 1, color in the grids to represent the following fractions, then write as a percent. So you can check, this is a 10 by 10 grid, so there are 100 squares here. So I want to represent 30 out of 100, or 30%, and we're going to do that by shading in 30 boxes. So let's do, here's 10, first row, 20, the second row, and then 30, the last row. So these first 3 rows, here is my 30%. And if I want, I can get a thicker pen, kind of fill it in easier. So there is our 30%, 3 rows. 30 out of 100. Our next one we need to do is 3 out of 100. So we have 100 total boxes. We only need 3 of them. So that is our 3%. 3 out of 100. 1/3 out of 100. That's 1/3 per 100, 1/3%. I don't even want to color in a whole box. So if you can carefully cut this into 3, you just want 1/3 of it. So I'm just going to actually just color in. Not even a half of it is 1/3 of that box. Exercise 2, it says no calculator. So we're going to practice this without using a calculator. So using the definition of the word percent, which we know means per 100, for every 100, write each percent as a fraction and then a decimal. So if I have 37.5% as a fraction, that's 37.5 per 100 or over 100. So I'm going to show you how you can do this. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So you're going to type in 37.5, do the slash for the fraction over 100. So if you want this to look like a nice fraction like this, you're going to highlight it. And then under that draw tab, we have that math button still. And it will write it like a nice fraction for you. 37.5 over 100. That's it. It doesn't say simplify. It just says write it as a fraction. So we're just going to write it as a fraction how we know. As a decimal, we need to quickly review our place value. So if I have 0 point number. This one is our ones, right? This is our ones. And if we kept going this way, this is our tens, hundreds, thousands, and so on. This side of the decimal, we don't have ones. We have tenths with the THS. Then we have hundredths. Then you have thousandths. And so on. But here's the important one, is the hundredths. So because it's hundredths, like this number is 37.5 hundredths. So we can think about that as putting that number, so without the decimal there, so that it ends here. So like pretending that decimal is here, I'm putting on my screen like you can see, 37, right? That's 37 hundredths. And then 5 more would get into the thousandths. So we can write this as 0.375 as a decimal. I've just got to switch back to typing and I'll make it nice and big. So this is going to be 0.375 as a decimal. And let's erase this so we can use this again. Okay, so now we have 100%. So 100% per 100. So when we write this, we know it's going to be 100 per 100. So to write this as a nice fraction, we just need to highlight over it. Under the draw tab, we can hit the math button. Now you might already recognize 100 over 100. If you do want to simplify, that's just going to be equal to 1. 100 over 100, the same number on top and bottom is always 1. If I wanted to write this as a decimal, practicing using this. So if we have 100 hundredths, it needs to end here. So we'd have 0, 0, 1. So 1.00 or just 1. Oops, I'm sorry, that's too small. So you can write it as 1.00. Oops, where am I writing? Oh, wow. How did I get all the way up to 144? So we can write 1.00 or you can just write 1. Both are okay. So now for this next one, 110%, 110 per 100. We can write it as a nice math fraction by going and hitting that math button, 110 over 100. You can simplify this, but we're just kind of writing it out. It's going to be the same kind of scenario that we just had with that 100%. If I want to write this, I need it to end in the hundredths. It's 110 hundredths. So writing it backwards, we'd get 1.10. You might be starting to notice a pattern with our percent to our decimals, and we'll talk more about that pattern once we finish this table. If I want to do 1%, I need 1 per 100 or 1 over 100. If I'm going to write this as a decimal, it's 1/100th. So we're going to start in the hundredths. That's the 1. Anything here needs to be filled in with a 0. So we get 0.01. And lastly, 1/2%. So here's where it's going to get weird. It's going to be 1/2 over 100. I don't know if this is going to work right when we highlight this and hit the math button. So let's see. Yeah, no, I didn't like it. It didn't write it right. But that's okay. So if we want to, we can draw it in. So actually what I did for some things was I actually drew it on the side over here. So you can do 1/2 all over 100. That's what we wanted. So we can use the marquee select like we did in some of our previous lessons and hit the math button, and it will write it for us how we want it. So that shows us 1/2 over 100. Ink to math. Sometimes it takes a moment to load, but it should write it how we want it. We can put it right there. Write it as a decimal, 1/2 over 100th. 1/2 is the same as 0.5. This one's going to be a little weird. So it's not even a hundredth, it's 1/2 a hundredth. So it's really going to go over here. It's going to be 5 thousandths. So that's going to be the weirdest one. And we can talk more about why in just a moment once I get this typing. Oops, I forgot 0. So it's 5 thousandths, so 0.005. So what you might have noticed is that when we went from percent to a decimal, all we did was move the decimal over 2 places. So move it over 2 places. So it starts here, move it over 2 places. There's a 0 there if we moved over a second. This one is like 0.5%. 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So if you move that decimal over 2 places, now you get 0.005. And that's still not loading for me. For some reason, my computer's just slow, but it is that 1/2 over 100 if it wants to load later. So now exercise 3 is with the calculator. So now we don't have to worry about it as much. So if you are in class, this is going to be a lot easier on the yellow calculators. You can go back into your unit 4. Everybody should have this calculator help. It shows you the steps between converting decimal to percent, percent to decimal, fraction to percent, percent to a fraction, decimal to a fraction, fraction to a decimal. Shows you all of those. But when we're doing this here online using our Desmos calculator, it's a little bit harder sometimes. So we need to change 350%. Let's do a decimal first. So maybe you saw this relationship and you know that you can move the decimal over the other 2 places over. On this calculator, percent to a decimal, if you hit 350%, it automatically is going to put this of next to it. So we're just going to say 1, because 1 is usually our total. So if you put 350% of 1, it's going to give you 3.5. So that will be the decimal. Let's make this nice and big. That's going to be our 3.5. If we want this as a fraction, convert to a fraction here. This says 7/2, or it would be 3 1/2. So we can write this as 7/2. Highlight it, and hit that math button, and it will write it as a fraction for us. Now, decimal to fraction is a lot easier, so let's type this in, 0.025. So we get 0.025. I typed it in as a decimal. I can click this button to convert to a fraction online, 1/40. So this even simplified it for us. So we can type in 1/40. And we can hit that math button to make it a nice fraction. To get the percent, I can't really do that on these calculators. There's not a way for me to convert it to a percent. So this is when we're going to need to use the rules. If you are using one of the yellow calculators, you just have to type in either the fraction or the decimal, hit the second button, it's the gray button, and then the percent button, and enter. But because I can't do that here, I'm going to just move this decimal over 2 places. So if I have it this like 0.375 to get the percent, I would need to move it 2 to the right. So move it over 2 to the right. That would be 2.5%. Let's make that a little bigger so it's easier to see. So again, on the yellow calculators in school, we can do this. We can't really do that at home using this Desmos calculator. So if you're going to do it on the yellow calculator or you have your own TI-34, type in the decimal or the fraction, the gray second button, then the percent button, and enter. And that's all in this calculator help document here. So a decimal to a percent, type in the decimal, hit the gray second, percent, enter. So now let's go back to our page we're working on. So now we have 1/8. So if I want 1/8 as a decimal, on this I can just type it in. So I'm going to type in a fraction. I need 1/8, and it tells me 0.125. That's what it is as a decimal. So again, I can convert it if I'm using a TI-34 calculator, or I can just move this decimal 2 places over and get 12.5%. So that's just looking at how we can do it. We can use this calculator. Sometimes we need to use that moving the decimal rule between percents and decimals, just because our calculator online isn't working, but you can also use the TI-34 multi-view. But you can use this chart to help you remember which way you need to move the decimal. So you have 2 practice questions. So this one is 1/2% the same as 50%? And then filling in this chart, so practicing our conversions. And then we're missing a letter here. Our exit ticket is filling in this chart, so even just more practice converting. So our self-reflection is I can write P/100 as a percent, P% is P/100, or I need help. When you're done with your exit ticket, make sure you go to Delta Math and complete your first assignment. So there's directions in Canvas on how to get to this Delta Math assignment. Make sure you go and you do it. It's not really related to this because it's our first Delta Math assignment. It's just going to be something really easy to practice. So make sure you do these 2 practice questions, your exit ticket, and then log on to Delta Math. When you're done, make sure you click Mark as Done in Canvas.